Welcome back to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, my guest not only discovered that consciousness supersedes physical death, but she also received some of the most significant life answers to questions only a spirit realm could answer. Joining me today, ladies and gentlemen, is near-death experiencer Venia Hill. Venia, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Absolutely no
Appreciate
problem at all. That's what we do here, near-death experiences. And I understand, Venia, that your near-death experience can be described as something that was extremely deep and transcendental. Would you say that?
Oh, absolutely. I was at the time I had it, I didn't realize how much information and the wealth of information I was exposed to. I wasn't as appreciative of it as I should have been, but I was exposed to quite a bit of information. So yes, yes.
That's absolutely wonderful to hear. But before we get into your near-death experience, why don't we walk backwards a little bit and get accustomed to your prior religious belief systems? Did you, at any given time, have a particular religion or spiritual practice you delved in prior to your near-death experience, or growing up at least?
We weren't, my family wasn't deeply spiritual, not spiritual, religious. And we attended church basically every Sunday. But that was the extent of it. My parents sent me to a Catholic school for a couple of years, but not so much for the religiosity of it, but for probably they thought it was a better type school environment. But I certainly wasn't very religious. And to be honest with you, the Catholic school their rituals and stuff didn't really sit right with me. But at that age, I didn't understand why. Of course, I do now. And it's not a bash on the Catholicism or anything, but I just, the whole religious upbringing type thing just wasn't ingrained in me, and just didn't sit well with me.
Okay, so with that said, sounds like before your near-death experience, you really weren't going into an afterlife thing, expecting to see the Pope or Mary, etc.
No, no, not at
Okay,
all.
okay. Well, with that said, why don't you talk to us about what caused your near-death experience?
Well, I hate this part sort of because it's kind of embarrassing for me, but hey, I was 17, so we can forgive the youth for some of the dumb things that they do. But my parents had decided they would send me on a trip to Italy. I think partly because, although they weren't travelers at all, but partly because my dad is half Sicilian, and I think it resonated with him on some level. So they agreed to send me, spend the money, which was quite a bit. And I was very excited to go, and I went, and we took the plane, and I got off the plane, and I was tired and exhausted, but we had arrived, and it was just like, hey, nobody's going to go to sleep now. So let me take these, at the time, I believe there were no-dose pills, pure caffeine pills. And I took a ton of them, a bunch of them. I don't even know how many, but I know that they were falling out of my mouth as I was trying to drink from the water fountain to swallow them. So that's how many I took. And by the time we were loaded onto the bus that was supposed to take us to the hotel, the caffeine started working and my heart started racing. And when I say racing, I mean I could literally hear it in my ears. And at first it was boom, 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 boom. And then it did a complete reversal, and it did the opposite. It just slowed down, like boom, 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 boom. And at some point it just completely stopped. And I can't say this enough. I've said it a few times before. I can remember that moment like it was like 2 hours ago, but hearing my heart stop. And the moment it did, my spirit just shot out of my body.
So it sounds like you went right into what we would describe as an out of body experience.
Out of body, yes. From a body that had stopped completely. My heart just stopped completely. Um, and I know that I was now I know that I was dead because at some point during the near death or the experience, I was looking at my body and I was seeing, a bunch of stuff. I was seeing my body, I was seeing other people, I was seeing the bus driver, I was seeing the traffic on this highway, but I'm looking at my body and there was no auric field coming from it, whereas it was coming from everyone else on the bus. There's an auric field that we all have, and it's either animated or it's an energetic field, and there was none coming from my body. It was so minute, it wasn't even funny. So I know that my poor body was in some stage of death or dying. We'll put it that way.
Now, when you say energies and you look down, apparently you were above your body at some
I
point
was
looking down.
when I popped out, I was you have to remember I was not physical at that point. So I was a spiritual type of body and or consciousness, shall we say. And that consciousness is omnidirectional. It sees everything. So I must have been floating somewhat up because I was looking, and when I was looking down at I was looking down at my body, which was partially laying down. But at the same time, I was seeing all these other things. So as far as what exact position I was in, it's kind of hard to say, because I was seeing everything. Like I said, I was seeing there were mountains outside. I was seeing the bus driver. I was seeing the people on the bus. I even remember seeing an ant walking, crawling on the this brown rubber strip on the bus. So that's how much of an awareness I had.
Quite certainly sounds like your consciousness was extremely heightened. Why don't you tell us where did you go from there?
From there, after I kind of gazed at my form, and made a few observations about my physical Vena, the physical Vena that was laying there. The bus driver kind of drew me because he was very animated. He was cursing, and the traffic over there was really insane. And I saw quite a bit about him, the bus driver, the chauffeur. Um, so much so that I mean, I even got into seeing like some of his past lives, um, and that he was quite sickly. And I saw like through his physical body to his, I guess you could say, his light body, but I saw him in his entirety. Um, and then once I saw the stuff about him, this presence overshrouded my presence and like welcomed me and took me out of that environment.
Now, this presence that took you out of that environment, I'm assuming it's the earthly environment. Did it take you into what we would deem a spiritual environment?
Well, yes. I mean, I would say that at the time that the presence came for me, I was aware of the spiritual environment, but I was focused on sort of what was right there in front of me. So this presence sort of opened things up to where I was cognizant now of different realms. I guess at some point I could have become cognizant of those realms, but I was too focused on what I was seeing about this bus driver. So the presence enveloped my being, and another whole realm just opened up to me, or I became aware of it, and I was no longer there on the bus or even aware of the bus.
And I understand that this presence also took you on a journey. Did this presence also identify itself?
The presence told me that it was my guide. And at the time, I didn't know what a guide was. So I asked, what is a guide? Well, I thought it, because we're not speaking. We weren't speaking. There was no verbal communication whatsoever. But I asked what was a guide, and it said that I would know soon enough. But it didn't answer me. But I also felt a sense of familiarity with this being that identified as my guide. But for the life of me, Lamont, I just could not figure out who it was or how I knew them.
So after this entity or being introduced itself as your guide, where exactly did it take you?
Well, at first it let me, I don't want to say relax, but it let me just be in what I term this white realm. Not a light or a tunnel, but it was a realm, and it was just a pure whiteness, but it was pulsating love, and this entire atmosphere of stillness and peace. And it just existed in this realm for quite a bit. I don't know how long, because I had no sense of time, no sense of any type of human obligation or humanness. And then after that, for however long, my guy told me that we were going to travel. And so it took me out into space. And whoa, space is
So
that's a
this
whole nother thing.
Right. So this guide took you out until what we would call our exosphere, off of the planet and
Yes,
deeper
yes,
out into the
yes.
horizon. Okay. What was it that your guide showed you there?
Well, there, at first, they didn't have to show me anything, but I was looking at space through a totally different way that you and I would look at it now. So there was no north, south, east, west, no anything like that. Space was, you can see the different layers of space. You can see energy fields in space. You could see traffic in space. You can even see entities in different dimensions in space. There was a lot of what I would say physical traffic in space, but there was a lot of dimensional traffic also in space. There was my guide did show me several planets, believe it or not, that are in our solar system that we have no clue about. But they're not visible to us, but they were visible to the form that I had out in space.
That would
I
certainly
saw,
send Neil Degrassi on the loop there.
yes, yes. And I was told that we won't in our lifetime be able to see these planets that are in our solar system, because we wouldn't have the instruments to pick them up, because they're sort of in like a different type of density, not dimension, but density. But that we would be able to pick up like some of the planets' movements, but we may even misinterpret what those are. Who knows? I don't know.
Now, I understand that your guide also brought you to one of these planets or worlds or someplace in another dimension where you were able to see the terrestrial life there. Why don't you talk to us about that?
Yes, well, the world, this particular world, it was fascinating. The thing that I remember the most about this world, although others remember other things, but the sun was like a light blue sun. It was gorgeous, but there were three moons that were so close to the sun, and they were not on top of each other, but extremely close to each other. And to this day, I can still see them in my mind. But the world was an aquatic world, and there was no real land masses on this world. Everything was underneath, and my guide took us below the water at some point, and the creatures that I saw, I mean, actual mermaids, um, fish with almost human type of heads, not necessarily art like totally human like ours, but near to it. Um, the most humongous uh whales, and there were octopus, but they were like intelligent type of beings that looked sort of similar to ours, but they had also some type of human characteristics to them. Um, but I guess the most fascinating were the actual mermaids, because there were so many different varieties of them. Green, pink, red, the albino ones. And they weren't all the same either. I mean, even though they had different colors, you would think maybe they were the same, but they weren't even the same amongst the different type colors. It was
Yeah, sounds
it
exhilarating, actually.
really was. And another thing too, were the structures. They were just gorgeous underneath. And I remember wondering to myself, how could, who built them and how could they be built? Like I realized that the mer people, which I call them, more than likely built them, but I'm not even positive about that. But it was just an observation that I'd made, that how could these structures be underwater? They were just gorgeous. They were they had like a self-lighting, like a bioluminescence to them. They were lit up and they just glowed, and they were just beautiful. They were beautiful. Um, and there were many type of beings that were going in and out of these structures. These, some seemed like maybe they could have been homes, but I'm not even sure. Maybe big centers where people, these mer people would gather. I don't know. I really don't know.
So, how did you exit out of this particular dimension, and where did you go after this with your guide?
Um, well, I wouldn't say it was a, I pretty sure it was a third dimensional planet. So I wouldn't say it was like a different dimension, but um, after my guy communicated to the mer person or the main mer person, we she opened they opened, I call her a she, but it wasn't a she, it was a androgynous. My guy was androgynous. There was a portal that was open underneath the water, and we went through this portal that was like this swirling energy. And we came out of the water and we went back to the white realm.
While there at the White Realm, did you have what many near death experiencers describe as a life review?
No, I did not have a life review. I had a life review during my visit, excuse me, to the void. I didn't have a life review during my near death experience, although my guy did show me certain things about my life um, that they wanted to show me. But no, not a total life review. Like um, I had a dark night of the soul in the void where I saw myself, but it wasn't even a life review in the void.
I understand, however, in this light realm, you did get a lot of the most pressing questions that just about every philosopher in the world, past and present, would have asked. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh, geez. Where to begin? I know that I was shown the angelic realm, and it's a beautiful, sublime realm, but you can't view these beings that are in this realm because it's such a it's in such a like a rarefied atmosphere. And they do exist and they do aid humans. They aid others also, not just humans, but they can be petitioned by our guides um, to help us if we need them. Um, I learned that we all have a guide. Some of us have more than one. Some of us have different ones throughout our life. Um, I learned about incarnating and the different roles we take throughout different incarnations. I learned that the LGBTQ community, it wasn't called that then, but that's just a very natural state um, of being, and I explain why in the book. I learned quite a bit. I mean, it's I learned a lot. I learned about abortion, that it's not the sin that we all think it is, or at least now. And it's gotten so much attention, but it shouldn't. Um, I mean, I learned a lot.
Yeah, I had a guest previously on my show who talked about when the spirit leaves the spirit realm and incarnates into the body, that very often it's at a later period of time, not
It's very late.
necessarily right, not necessarily or not at all at conception, which is
It's never at conception. I was shown that it's used typically right before birth, sometimes even after birth. Um, but rarely does it come too much before that week before birth. So, and like a miscarriage is typically a soul that is a spirit that has decided, hey, it's not going to incarnate into that particular fetus, and so the fetus is no longer needed. And it may be because the mother and father's life changes, circumstances change, or the soul is, or the spirit has just decided it's changed its mind, so it's not going to incarnate into that couple, or maybe at that time. And that's what a miscarriage is. Um, And to know that is very comforting because, the spirit, which is a part of the soul, can never be damaged. It can't be damaged. It can't be destroyed. Never, ever. And I think if more people realize that, there wouldn't be such controversy over abortion. No one is for killing anything, but in reality, a soul or spirit is never damaged, ever. And it will never enter into a fetus that's going to be aborted. Just never. It just doesn't do that. And I was shown that. My guide specifically showed me that. At the time that it showed me this, abortion really was not a controversial issue back then. But it is now, and I guess it's timely that I put it in the book. So it could help those maybe that are struggling to either have one or not have one, or if they have a miscarriage or not, hopefully it can help some people.
Now, I know that you were shown a lot of information. Did you have any specific questions of your own for your guide that were answered?
I did, but unfortunately, they were more about what lied ahead for in my life, and my guide wasn't giving up that information. I didn't get any peaks or anything like that. The questions they answered maybe were things that they were already showing me, but the questions that I basically put to my guide, it's like,
You're gonna have to ride it out and wait and see.
The guide of tough love, basically.
Sounds like it. So, with that said, did you go anywhere else, or was anything else revealed to you while you were in this white room or after this white room?
Well, my guide did show me several of my lifetimes, and one in particular I thought was quite interesting. I was some Scandinavian boy, teenager, that was very cruel and very mean, and I hurt a lot of other children. And I was shown this life, and it was pretty rough to see. Um, and I was kind of appalled seeing it, but my guide did tell me that, um, that it was actually, believe it or not, necessary for me to see that. And I believe that because now I just can't stand violence or cruelty of any kind. I can hardly watch it on television. My husband can tell you I'll turn the TV off if I see too much of it. But but what was interesting about that was that my guide explained to me that it was actually necessary for me to see that, and it wasn't being shown to me as like a judgment or saying, hey, Vina, you were like a horrible person. It was basically showing me that that was just a small sliver of the pie of who I was, you know. And I was shown a couple other lifetimes too. One in particular also was myself as a slave woman on Earth here. That all I did was cook, and that was it, day in, day out, and it was like backbreaking work. But I was so positive, and I was, I handled it very well. And my guide specifically showed me my attitude and how I handled it, and basically was trying to tell me, keep that attitude, keep that positiveness throughout whatever I'm dealing with or whatever I'm going through. Um, you know, let that carry over here, because a lot of things do bleed over between lives. A lot doesn't, but a lot of things do. And that was one of the things that I was told that should stay and bleed over. Whereas with the kid that was cruel, don't allow, that memory of that to stay with me. Release, let that go. So I mean, I guess there was a method to my guide's madness.
So it sounds to me that if I can recap your near death experience, we have a concept that says that we come from somewhere, we originate from a spiritual realm, we leave that spiritual realm, we incarnate into a physical body. When that life is over, consciousness continues, obviously, and it can put on another jacket in the form of what we call reincarnation or transmigration.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the important thing to remember is this is just a tiny dot of who we really are. We really are our soul. And that soul is beautiful. It's pure. It just cannot be diminished, diluted in any way. But we can choose to come reincarnate, or we can choose not to. It's really our choice. It's funny because I had someone ask me, well, where does, if things are set up, if we set up things, where's the free will at? Well, the free will is that we just chose to come. That is the free will. We chose to come, and we set up the circumstances in which we're going to experience when we're here. And that's the free will. So
Yeah, I had a near death experiencer on my show who actually said there is free will on both sides of the curtain. Yes, there are certain points that we plot before we get here, but
absolutely.
what we do to get to that plot is totally the free will from the earthly realm.
Absolutely. I would always tell my son that if our destination is California, we're going to get to California. So if we've set up to accomplish something in this life, we're going to do it. Now, we can get to California, we can take the train, we can fly, we can drive, we can even walk. How we get there, it's up to us. That's the free will. But if our goal is California, we're going to get there.
Not to mention what you're doing to each other on the way there.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, how did was this moving towards the end of your journey, or was there anything else you were shown before coming back to your physical body on the bus?
Yes, I was allowed to go to this beautiful garden. And I had just a wonderful experience with a unique type flower. I've never seen it on earth, probably never will. I was like a rose and a hibiscus and a gladiola kind of all mixed into one. Um, and I was shown that everything is so connected. Um, we're all connected, all animal, plant, human, whatever's out in space, everything is connected, deeply connected. We're all part of this one. So yeah, after that beautiful experience in the garden, then I was brought back to the white realm and given some wonderful advice that I've really tried to follow throughout this life. Haven't always been successful, but it has helped me in some of the rougher periods. Um, but the main message that my guide did want to tell me was that above all else, be kind. And that was its exact thought words to me. Above all else, be kind. And that doesn't mean being a fool or letting people walk all over you or anything like that. But when you can be kind, be kind.
Such a simple message, which is parallel to many other near-death experiences, but very hard to apply
Yes.
practically
Yes.
at
Yes.
times. So, what was it actually like coming back to your body? And at this point, did people notice that you were slumped over on this bus?
My classmates had absolutely no clue whatsoever, but they were just as dippy as I was. We were teenagers, but but it, I you know I've said it before, it was a lot easier coming out of my body than going back into it. There's quite a bit of adjusting that has to take place to reposition those different bodies back into your physical, and then to make that connection to the pineal gland. I know I'm saying that wrong, but that was something that I was shown during the experience, that the pineal gland, the pineal gland, sorry, um, is very important in connecting all those different bodies together um, with your soul. So um, that adjustment had to be made. And my guy did have to do something to my heart because it had taken a beating. I mean, God knows how many pills I took, but my heart took a real beating.
Funny you mentioned the pineal gland. There was a book written by an author. The book was entitled The God Molecule. And in that book, the author describes that the pineal gland is most likely where the soul sits. So that's
Well,
yeah.
our soul, mind you, never incarnates. Now that is something that I saw, but the spirit does. The spiritual part, essence of the soul does. And yes, it connects your spirit with your other bodies, your etheric, your astral, and the physical. That it's a very important, we call it a gland, I call it like the mastermind, the gatekeeper, because that's basically what it is. It gathers all of those different bodies together and keeps them, tethers them to the physical.
Now, when you came back from this near-death experience, did you tell anyone immediately about
I
what
told
you?
no one ever, just not until this last year. As a matter of fact, my family never knew. It wasn't until I wrote the book that they found out.
And that's quite common amongst near-death experiencers for fear of being labeled crazy, etc. There was a time where people were actually put into madhouses because they were talking about these near-death experiences that were very real and factual to them, but the doctors and people in the medical community just couldn't fathom what these people were talking about. They saw them as pure hallucinations. Now, when your family found out about the book, what was their response?
They were shocked. Um, it's funny because my family sort of believes, most of my family believes in this type of stuff, but not really to this extent. Um, they were shocked that I never told them. But the unsaid part was, or the quiet part was, we knew there was something strange about you. Um, so I guess they were shocked, but not really.
And with that said, saying something quote unquote strange about you, many near death experiencers talk about coming back after a near death experience with what we call after effects. They may, for example, have a bout of precognition, higher empathy levels, lack of fear of death. Did you come back different, noticeably different because of your near death experience?
Absolutely. And not just me, but I think that what happens is when you go to the other side while still in human form and come back, I believe part of you is untethered some kind of way, loosened up, and you're able to see a little bit beyond this third dimension a little easier. There's a lot of people that meditate for years, and then they get certain abilities. I think the same thing happens with the near-death experiencer. You just get almost instantly untethered. So yes, and I was able to see quite a bit of things. I could see when people are lying. I can see events that were going to happen. I remember shortly after the near death, when I first got into the military, I was sitting across from my first sergeant, and I just knew he was getting ready to die, and he was scolding me for bouncing checks. Um, and he was nice about it, and I really liked him a lot. And as I'm looking at him taking this verbal, spanking, and it just came over me, he's getting ready to die. And, you can't tell someone that, and within not even 2 weeks, he had dropped dead of a heart attack. So yes, it's been things like that throughout my entire life. I mean, if someone asked me a question about something, I could literally answer them almost immediately, without thinking about it. And, my family has kind of used that ability, even though they didn't know why I had it. But they've, questioned me quite often throughout the years. Hey, can you tell me this or tell me that, So they were aware that something was going on, just not quite why or what.
Absolutely fascinating. So, why don't you tell us the name of your book and where we can find it?
The name of the book is My Near-Death Experience from A to Z. This is it. And it can be found online, I believe, at any online retailer. I know that people have ordered it from Barnes and Noble, Amazon, of course, but I'm sure any online retailer would have it.
Well, Venia, your near death experience is quite a journey of itself. I know you went on a journey yourself physically, but just describing the journey puts us on a journey.
Yes, and and honestly, it's people like you that really help a lot of people because, you know, getting the word out there and the information out there is so important. And you're doing that. So I love when it says real spiritual talk because that's basically what it is. Real spiritual talk, it's not that dogma or that same old stuff. It's, hey, this is really what's there and really what's going on, and you're getting people like you are getting the word out, so you're doing a very important thing. I just want to add.
I want to thank you very much for saying that. That's right. Real spiritual talk radio,
Yes.
nothing watered down here. Well, Venia, I want to thank you for coming on Real Spiritual Talk Radio and sharing with us your absolutely fascinating account.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Venia Hill.
Thank you.